Today on the It's a Celebration Says podcast, I will be discussing a professional sound guy correcting me and offering their insight on lavalier microphones, hitting 10,000 subscribers on this channel, and other stuff too, so go ahead and stick around. Over the last couple of weeks, I have been really diving into and exploring lav mics and going on what some might call my lavalier microphone meta. And in the last episode, I put out a call saying, hey, I'm kind of lost and confused about lav mics. If there are any professional sound guys, your input and insight would be really helpful. That's how I sound to any professional sound guy. And it just so happens that I did get a submission from a professional sound guy who will not skip an opportunity to correct me and to make me look like a complete fool. So let's go ahead and jump to that. This is a submission from none other than SoundSpeeds, aka Alan. Take it away.
You know, Bandrew, if you're looking for an expert on lavalier microphones to give you some insight regarding lavalier microphones, you can just ask. You don't have to say, oh, does anybody out there watching happen to understand anything about lavs? If so, please write in the comments below and tell me. Was that a pretty decent imitation? Hey, audience, write in the comments below and say if I nailed it or not. Anyway, I have made a short list here to hopefully keep me on topic here because you guys know I'll take too many tangents if I don't. Now, in the real world, I teach a class called Lav mics, the invisible safety net, because in the world of film, that's how we refer to them. We usually will overhead boom something first, then we will underboom something second, and then we will resort to a plant microphone, which is in 2024, quite honestly, it is usually some sort of a boom microphone planted someplace. And then we'll resort to lav mics as a plant microphone next, followed by a lav mic on a person. The reason why is because a lav mic is stuck in one particular place on their clothes. It can have clothing rustle. If someone turns their head, they're going off mic. It's going to be underneath whatever material. Could be something light, could be something heavy. It cannot be visible from the camera, but that right there limits things because it has to be a small piece of micro technology. Now, let me sidestep here for a second. Let's talk about large diaphragm condensers. Where are they usually measured from when it comes down to frequency response? Usually about 1 meter away. There are some manufacturers that do it from closer distances, but when you have a microphone that is relatively flat at a distance of 1 meter, and then you bring it close, what happens? Proximity effect through the roof. Now, we've kind of addressed this before, you know, with regards to, and you kind of did this the past couple of weeks, talking about lavalier microphones compared to large diaphragm condensers. But one thing you have not discussed is polar pattern. Most of the large diaphragm condensers that you are talking about are cardioid, some might be supercardioid, but lavalier microphones are usually omnidirectional. What does not exist in omnidirectional patterns, or it's a lot more difficult to actually create in an omnidirectional pattern? Proximity effect. And why is that? Because if you have a microphone that's here and someone's talking directly towards it, the pattern is focused on the mouth, as opposed to an omnidirectional pattern microphone where the voice is coming in from one little bitty area. So in order to get proximity effect, you basically have to swallow the microphone, put it all the way up in your mouth and practically swallow the thing in order to have your mouth completely encapsulate the capsule. Okay, so now we've addressed that. Lavalier microphones in the world of film are a weapon of last resort. That's why I call them the invisible safety net. And the goal is to have it match a boom microphone. A boom microphone is obviously going to sound better because it's a full-size microphone as opposed to a piece of micro technology. A lavalier microphone is small because it has to be hidden. It has to be invisible from camera. If it were that easy to make a large diaphragm or a small diaphragm condenser microphone that is a full-size mic, they would all be that size, but they're not. When you talk about use case scenarios and what is it designed for, unless you're Dolly Parton, you're not going to hide a large diaphragm condenser on your chest. Just not going to happen. I do know a sound pro that was able to hide a small diaphragm condenser in the cleavage of Dolly Parton, but that was years ago, and I'm not kidding about that. He actually did do it, and he ran it to a pack that supplied it with 48 volts phantom power and transmitted. Pretty amazing. I thought that was pretty awesome when I heard this story. Anyway, but the goal is with a lavalier microphone, it has to match a boom microphone, and by that, it has to match. In modern technology, we're able to use processing to create an audio match of something. But in order for a lav to sound natural, you have to look into the perspective of the shot that it's going to be used in, usually a wide shot. And what do we always say about wide shots? Well, when you have a wide shot, it can look like a wide shot and sound like a wide shot. But if you have a close-up, it cannot look like a close-up and sound like a wide shot. If you want a wide or a tight shot to sound close, you can do that and resort to a lav mic. But it doesn't work that way when you're talking about it something that sounds farther away, sounding like, a wide shot, but it looks like a close-up. That's when it doesn't work. And so the sound has to be processed as real, which is very, very common this day and age with isotope RX and stuff to make something sound closer in match to a boom mic. Now, on that note, I've talked about perspective being a factor. One thing I did not mention is that in a lot of wide shots, you have a couple other things to consider too. There's usually a music bed that gets you into a scene, or special effects sounds of something like cars driving by in the foreground. And another thing they will often use in movies is they will go ahead and use the lav mic, make it sound far away. I'm sorry, not the lav mic. They will make the boom mic sound farther away and then make that a match for a wide shot, because anybody can ADR something that's a wide shot when you're seeing a shot of a building and then you hear someone do a lead in line. And sometimes they don't even bother EQing it to sound like a wide shot. Sometimes it's just going to play on the boom mic, and then they're just going to start it with the first 3 or 4 words of the line, and the person's mouth is going to pretty well match the boom on the close-up. So they'll just go ahead and use that and not even the lav. Now, many times you've also heard me say back off on the microphone because it will sound more natural. I'm not saying it sounds more broadcast. People always say, I don't want to sound like a broadcast, but guess what? When you talk into a large diaphragm condenser this far away, you're going to. And why is that? Because in the world of radio, people have been speaking into large diaphragm condensers this far away for decades. As a matter of fact, go back to the early days of radio, one of the reasons why people spoke into those microphones, they were usually farther away, first of all, and they raised their voice and spoke into it. And you are somewhat right when you say part of it has to do with the environment. Sometimes it's just a big room and it's concrete reinforced or something like that with acoustic treatment, something like that. But in a lot of recording studios, it is just a big room. Even warehouses are used as sound stages now. And the big idea there is that if the room is big enough, then the sound will dissipate before it gets too far away. But then we'll build sound stages on, anywhere out of warehouses and then throw sets into it. And then it's going to sound more like the room that you're shooting in anyway than a recording studio. So, but when you're talking about radio and broadcast, sure, it's going to be treated. It's going to be a big room and it's going to be acoustically treated. And you're using a large diaphragm where the signal to noise ratio is going to be a lot higher. But you're not going to hear me say that if you back off on a microphone, it's going to sound more broadcast. It will sound more natural. What is the difference? Well, if you want to sound like you're on the radio, then talk into a microphone right here. And yes, there is some truth in the fact that people are used to and being trained to like that sound. But where did that sound originally come from? Back in the world of early radio, people, as I mentioned, were farther away from their microphones. But as we started to get closer and you started to hear more in NPR and radio hosts, talk shows, that kind of stuff, they were speaking very close to the microphones. And sometimes if they are farther away from the microphones, it's a low enough noise. They'll put a gate on them and they'll sometimes add a lot of compression. So that way they sound louder. And that way it also sounds closer than it would if you were farther away. Now, something else to keep in mind. In the early days of radio, how were people listening to their sound? Usually on speakers, not in headphones. So if you're listening, for example, at your house, when was the last time you've heard of a family in the early days of radio in, let's say, the 30s, 40s, or 50s having a subwoofer or a high quality sound system? Didn't happen. They usually had one little speaker on the side of their radio, and that was what they listened to. The quality was better when it was being broadcast than it was when it was being received. In modern day, we even have HD transmitted audio, and we have really good quality sound systems at our houses, including 5.1 surround sound systems that have been around for probably 20 to 25 years in commonplace in people's houses. As a matter of fact, I remember getting a 5.1 sound system in 2003, and I felt like I was late to the game. But then a lot of the times also people will listen to radio where? In their car, on their commute to work or something like that. And until recent years, car stereos were complete garbage. People didn't really have a good car stereo system. Usually they only had 2 speakers in the front, and it was whatever quality radio they put in there, which is the reason why in the 90s, companies like Circuit City and Best Buy used to offer premium sound systems where they would charge you out the wazoo to replace your car sound system with a decent one. But in the modern day world, what are we doing? We're making sound a priority for cars, which is also one of the reasons why it will sound more movie theater-like. And people actually have said, guess what? We need to make this sound quieter. We need to make it easier for people to commute in dry places because they know that traffic is not getting any better. So things will sound better in their cars. But when it comes down to bass, in early sound systems, in a car, at your house, you lacked bass. So that's one of the reasons why the increased bass really worked to the advantage when it came down to radio broadcasting. It sounded more natural by the time it was broadcast and people were receiving it. Now, this day and age, most car radios, you can run them flat on the EQ and it's going to sound just fine. But that's because you don't have to increase it. The sound system is designed to sound good now. And it's also a lot higher detail than it used to be. So when you're talking about microphones, and to pull this back into lavalier microphones, what you got to understand is that lav mics are not designed for you to use in any kind of a studio environment like the one that I'm in right now or the one that you are in. It's not designed for that. What it's designed to be is a weapon of last resort. People like Deadpool, Black Adam, believe me, I know firsthand about Black Adam because I worked on that movie. We will put superheroes with a lavalier microphone and hide the transmitter someplace on them. That way you'll never know it exists. A lot of the time, they shoot those shows with so many wide shots and with so many cameras that you cannot get a boom in there quite often. And so we will resort to those lav mics, which means post guys have to do processing even on the close-ups to make it sound like a match for the wides. And believe it or not, they do that. And it's not hard to do, but you cannot process a lav mic the same way as you would a boom microphone. It's not going to be a match. It's just not going to work that way. It has to be processed differently. So a lot of the times people who do lavs for podcasts and stuff will use the same mentality that they're used to and saying, well, I'm going to process it this way. But you can't do that. A lav mic is designed for it to be worn on a person, and it's going to be flatter. The pickup of a lav mic is only about the size of a beach ball. And anything outside of that, it's not going to pick it up great. But a lot of the reach on large diaphragm condensers and small diaphragm condensers, they're cardioid, they're going to be able to pull it in audio from a little bit farther away. But the EQ of a lav mic is different. Part of it is because it's smaller. Part of it's because it's omnidirectional. But it's also against the chest cavity, which will help it pick up a little bit more bass than it would if it were farther away or someone holding it. But at the same time, it's not going to still pick up a whole lot of bass because why? Proximity effect. Proximity effect doesn't exist on an omnidirectional pattern microphone. I've talked a lot longer than I expected to right now, so I'm going to end you with one final thought. The number one place for people to watch movies and television shows in 2024 is on their phones. You would say, well, why not on their computer? Why not in movie theaters? Why not on a home television? They do, but nowhere near as many times as people will watch on their phones. Maybe it's because streaming has become so easy for people to do when they are on the go. Maybe it's because people just cannot sit down and watch a movie as a family, and so they will watch it on their phones whenever. Maybe it's because people are watching these things while they work, and it's easy to put a little screen next to their desk. I don't know, but your audience might have some insight into that. And one last thing, and then I promise I will leave you. Believe it or not, this entire audio from this little response to you was done on a lav mic. Did I fool you? I don't know if I did or not, but believe it or not, that was done right here. And this is by no means a premium microphone. This is not even a $200 microphone. I think this one, as of the time of this video, sells for $160. It is the Deity Pro, WLav Pro, and I'm recording onto the Deity Theos. So it's not even being transmitted or anything like that. It is being recorded, but just on a lav mic pack. And this is a lav mic. So there you go.
Alan, thank you so much for that video submission. The first thing I want to say is that was a great impression of me. I am deeply, deeply offended, but that was great and very accurate. Second thing I want to say is if you are looking for professional sound advice from a boom operator, somebody who uses shotgun microphones and lavs on the regular, go check out SoundSpeeds on YouTube. He has a wealth of knowledge and he's just giving it away. He's giving it away. You don't need to buy the cow. He's giving it for free. It's amazing. So go check out Sounds. I don't think that is a correct analogy here. I think people use that for something very different. But he's given the information away, so go check it out. But to summarize what he said about lav mics, he calls them the invisible safety net and said that lavs are not designed to be used in studio environments like the space that I record in or the space that he records in, and they're more designed to be a weapon of last resort. First option is always going to be overhead booming. Second option, under booming. Third option will be a plant mic, which will be an SDC or a shotgun microphone. Fourth option will be a plant mic, which would be a lav mic. And fifth option would be a lav mic planted on the individual, worn on the body. Also, up until now in this podcast, I have actually been recording with a lav mic clipped somewhere to my body. And if you're watching the video, can you guess where? Of course you can, because it's incredibly obvious. I have not worn a beanie in years, and there is also a very shiny clip in the center of my forehead. So that is where the lav mic is, quote unquote, hidden, or in plain sight. A wireless lav clipped to the beanie in the center of my forehead. My understanding is this is a very common position for theater, because if you have a big bulky costume, if you're moving around a lot, you could get clothing rustle, as Sound Speeds pointed out. But also if it's clipped statically on your chest, if you move your head, you're going to move off axis. So in theater, they want the microphone hidden, so they will put it under the wig in the center of the forehead, and it's supposed to give you a pretty good sound. So that is what I have been using. I'll talk about the microphone and what I've been testing, but that was just fantastic information from Sound Speeds, and he did make a request. I guess some kind of sacrifice that I have to make for this information, and he said, you have to overhead boom yourself with the Shure SM7B, which is what I am now going to switch to. I will, of course, need to have some kind of spectral denoise to remove the hiss, because the 7B is incredibly quiet, and I am having to drive the preamp on my Universal Audio X8 to 100%, so my gain is set at 65 decibels, and there is a lot of hiss. So I will need to run it through spectral denoise to remove that and make it sound decent. I hope it's tolerable, because we're sticking with it for the rest of this episode. I have no idea why he made this request. I can only speculate that it's because, number one, he knows I love the SM7B. He knows the SM5, which is the predecessor to the 7B, was designed to be a boom microphone. He loves overhead miking stuff, so he's forcing me to do it. And most importantly, the main motivating factor, in my opinion, is he just likes to see me suffer. So that's probably why he requested this. And if you hate this, if this sounds terrible, blame him. Even though it's likely because I am overhead miking poorly, improperly, just blame him. It's his fault. Because he's making me do it. I don't have any safety blanket of here's a microphone 4 inches from my face. But now let's switch back to the lav microphone and talk about what I have been testing. Full disclosure, this was sent to me. It is a loaner from Shure. It is the Shure Move microphone. It is a fully wireless lav microphone system. You could just get the microphone itself and connect it Bluetooth to your phone, or you can get a receiver and connect it over USB to your computer, or run it into your camera. I'm recording over USB. While I have been using this the last week, it finally clicked for me. I finally understand why people like these true wireless lav kits like the Deity Pocket, the DJI Mic 1, or the Rode Wireless Go or Wireless 2. The sound is not going, in my opinion, the sound is not going to exceed that of an LDC or SDC. It's going to sound worse. It's going to sound roomier. It's going to be slightly more distracting. But it is so incredibly convenient. Holy Toledo, is it convenient? And that has really been a joy over the last week, because I have been in voice calls for hours doing Dungeons and Dragons or doing my weekly voice call, and I would have a lav mic clipped to the collar of my shirt where it still doesn't sound good, or clipped to my beanie or the bill of a cap with my AirPods in, and I can just wander about my home and still be in the calls, and it's incredible. It is just so convenient not having to be tied to a singular location. So it just finally clicked for me. Oh, I understand why people are sacrificing the sound quality a little bit for complete and utter convenience. One big downside would be it's another thing to charge. But if it's plugged into your computer all the time and you have that charging case and everything set up, it's not the biggest deal, but it is just one more thing to worry about. Is the battery going to die? Am I not going to have it today? Is something going to go wrong? Is it going to get interference over wireless? Something like that. But overall, incredibly convenient and fun to use, and it removes one more thing to think about and consider. And hopefully it is providing good enough sound quality. I do have some sound panels on my desk. I have one directly underneath my keyboard, and I have a few more 12 by 12s against my computer monitor to reduce a bit of the reflections because I knew I was going to be overhead booming the SM7B. That is what I have been testing. Now let's jump back to the SM7B being overhead mic'd about a foot away from my mouth. Terrible idea, but hey, we're doing it. And let's talk about hitting 10,000 subscribers on this channel. First thing I want to say is thank you so much. This has been a long time in the making. This channel has been around since 2018, but the very first episode of this podcast launched back in October of 2015. That means I have been spending a day a week for 8.5 years producing this podcast. 384 episodes. This is episode 384. I just thought it would be fun to come up with some statistics or analytics. If we assume only 4 hours per episode, which is very conservative, in many cases, it far exceeds 4 hours an episode. But if we say 4 hours per episode, that is 1,536 hours spent on this podcast. The channel that currently hit 10,000 subs, the BSP channel, was only launched on the 30th of July, 2018. Before then, this podcast was uploaded to the Geeks Rising YouTube channel from 2015 to 2018. Then it had a very brief run on the Podcastage channel for about a month until I realized, oh, they don't care about this at all. They are here for microphones. How about you don't shove your ideas about content creation and news down their throat? Leave them alone. So I decided to launch a standalone podcast channel, and that is why we are here. Little bit of thought process on why I initially moved it off of Geeks Rising. I understood that variety channels weren't really working on YouTube anymore, because if you have a subscriber who subscribes to watch the Bandrew Says podcast, and then they also get recommendations for the Paper Robots, Sunshine and Power Cuts, other shows, Tourette's podcast, they may not click on those. And when the YouTube algorithm sees people not clicking on those recommendations, the next time a Bandrew Says podcast episode is published, they're going to be less likely to recommend that video to those subscribers. So that is why the whole variety channel thing kind of died off and lost a lot of popularity, and why I decided, okay, I think it's time to stop having all the podcasts hosted on this single hub and move it off onto its own channel. And I thought, yeah, let's give Podcastage a go. Terrible idea, but you live, you learn. I don't think too much damage was done by that, and that's another thing I want to share. It's okay to experiment and try things on YouTube with your channel. It's likely not going to destroy anything. It's likely not going to set your channel on fire. I thought, hey, let's give this a shot, see if it works. If not, we can just stop doing it. We can move on from there. And that is exactly why I was okay doing it. So don't be terrified to try stuff out on your channel. I won't say that it will not kill your channel because I don't know what goes on behind YouTube's algorithm under the hood or anything. So I won't speak in certainty, but I will say it's probably not going to. It's not likely to. I can't imagine it would, but maybe it will. So maybe don't experiment. I don't know. To celebrate hitting 10,000 subscribers, I thought it would be kind of fun to share this compilation of clips from my video podcasts ranging from 2015 to I think the last clip is from 2023. It is just hilarious how deeply uncomfortable I am in the early clips, how much I say I have no idea what I'm doing. It is painful to watch, painful to listen to. But we all start somewhere, and it is hilarious. So let's go ahead and check out that clip now.
I think I'm slowly losing my mind. But yeah, welcome. This is the first podcast that's actually going on YouTube. We'll go ahead and get into it in a second, but before we do that, as per usual, leave a 5-star rating and subscribe and do all that stuff in iTunes. That's why I do it, because I want you guys to understand me a little bit better, because nobody does. Anyways, Jesus. And for those of us who don't get incinerated or vaporized by a nuclear bomb, we're all going to suffer tremendously. Hey, you're exposed. And now that we've told you that, go ahead and subscribe to PewDiePie. I doubt I would get a comment saying, "Oh my god, that microphone sounds so bad!" Ah! And then the person dies? What? Okay, if you want to swim, just paddle your arms and then pushing a kid into a pool. And guess what? Unless you train that kid is gonna drown. And I don't want that. Albeit I'm not going to be a 19-year-old blonde girl who's 5 foot tall, but I will do that. And it will be a blast. And then the wheel started turning. The wheel started turning, and I thought, oh, I can torture him. This is going to be fantastic. I have to say, I think that's quite a progression, but I can't help but laugh because I think the worst sounding clip of the bunch was the very last clip from 2023, where it should be the best sounding. But to defend myself, I was testing out a super budget foam windscreen from Amazon that just killed all the high frequency, and I did not account for that with an EQ, so it just sounded dull and dead, sounded terrible, and I was using one of my favorite microphones, which makes it even more painful. It was the Neumann KMS 105. It should sound fantastic. It does sound fantastic. But when you put a 50-cent ball foam windscreen on, yeah, it kills the top end and makes it sound dull and dead and awful. But I wanted to share that with you because I thought that was kind of fun looking back over the years, and I want to send a sincere thank you to each and every one of you. If you are subscribed to this channel, thank you so much. If you follow the audio version of this podcast, thank you so much. If you choose to spend any amount of your day listening to me talk, it really does mean the world to me. So thank you so much for giving me something to do for the last 8.5, 9 years. It gives me a great hobby, it's a great outlet, and it gives me purpose. So thank you so much for all the support over the years. 10,000 subscribers. I never thought this podcast would get 5. So thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. Now let's jump to what you had to say. We already got corrected by sound speeds. So the very first comment comes from Anko. They say, I never really mind the microphone and frame, only if the person constantly touches/moves the arm or mic, I find it very distracting. On the other hand, maybe I'm old, but I still don't like all the headphones. It just looks so closed off. Certainly if there are more persons in the same room, all with headphones, but I don't get why almost nobody uses IEMs or ear pods for sound. Anko, thank you very much for the comment and the question. I am not sure why other people do not use IEMs or earbuds when they're recording, but what I can do is share why I choose not to use IEMs or earbuds to monitor what I'm recording. Whenever I have IEMs, earbuds, earplugs, anything plugging my ears, the resonance of my voice in my head gets extremely loud.
Go ahead and try this. Take out your earphones that you're listening to me on, pause the podcast, plug up your ears, and then start talking. What you'll hear is as you plug your ears, this resonance in your head gets extremely loud. And when I am monitoring, I want to be able to hear primarily the actual microphone that is being recorded. Because what I'm trying to hear is if the microphone is clipping, if I am popping the microphone, if I am moving off axis. And when that resonance in my head gets that loud, it becomes difficult to differentiate what I am monitoring and what I am hearing bouncing around in my head. The only way that I found to offset that is to increase the monitoring level, and I don't want to do that because I like monitoring a little bit quieter because I want to protect my hearing. With over-ear headphones, I don't have that same issue because nothing is actually plugging my ears, plugging up my ear canal, so that resonance doesn't build up. I know there are podcast producers like Stephen Bandrew from Better Podcasting who uses IEMs when he's recording. I am sure you can get used to that, you can get acclimated to it, and understand how best to use IEMs or decipher IEMs when you are monitoring. But I just like how comfortable it is to have the over-ears because I don't have to worry about overcoming that resonance that I hear. Maybe that's something other people don't exhibit or experience, but I exhibit it and experience quite heavily. That's actually something I used to my advantage when I played in a band. When you play in bands and you sing harmonies, you need to be able to sing on key. And when you're going around to different venues, you're going to have to say, hey, I need more of myself in this monitor. Turn it up more and more and more. And you never get enough of yourself in the monitor, so it's hard to hear what you're singing over all the metal guitar being played, the loud drums. So what I did, I would wear earplugs, yes, to protect my hearing, but also to hear very clearly what notes I was singing. So it helped me stay on pitch because that resonance, when my ears are plugged, becomes so loud that it would overpower the loud guitars and drums going on stage. So that is why I do not use IEMs or earbuds when I'm monitoring. I want to hear primarily the microphone that is being recorded over the resonance bouncing around in my head. And when my ears are plugged, it gets significantly louder. That resonance in my head gets a lot louder. Thank you very much for the question. That is a great question. Let's jump to the next one. Next comment comes from Yusuf VE Artist. He says, excellent reasons as to why the microphone is in frame. I think there's a fourth reason too. They want to be seen as authentic. They don't want to conform to what's industry standard. Having the mic in frame or even holding the mic while talking makes you feel relatable and authentic. It's also fun. They're purposefully not doing what the industry standard is, hide the mic. It's a philosophical choice. The mic is in frame in my videos because I'm recording in an untreated room. Keeping it close to my mouth helps keep the quality up and reduces reverb as much as possible. Then I throw some de-reverb on the audio to get rid of 80% of it so it sounds clean. Yusuf, thank you very much for the comment. That is super interesting. I had not considered that having a microphone in frame was a message in and of itself. I had not considered what kind of message having a microphone in frame might convey. I had also not considered that having a microphone in frame was going against any kind of standard. But that is clearly because I am biased. The main content that I consume is YouTube and podcasts. On YouTube and in podcasts, the primary placement for a microphone is close to the mouth. So I have always viewed that, or at least the last 10, 15 years, I have viewed that as normal. I never really considered that to be anything other than the normal way of things. But as I said, that's my bias. Then you have boom operators who spend their entire life getting microphones out of frame, so when a microphone is in frame for them, that is unnatural. So it goes to show this conditioning that we all have, based on what we watch and based on what we consume, and then in turn based on what we start to do. Because I watched so much YouTube and podcasting, I always thought the microphone being in frame was perfectly fine. But somebody like Sound Speeds He spends his entire life getting microphones out of frame, ensuring microphones are not in frame, so when it comes time for him to place a microphone, the natural placement for him is with the microphone out of frame. Something else that I want to discuss here is about the authenticity and relatability. Around the start of the pandemic and lockdown in 2020, we had a lot of those late night talk show hosts and TV hosts who had to start hosting videos from home, and what did we find? Their audio was absolutely abysmal. And frankly, that didn't make sense to me because these are highly paid people. They have massive teams. Those massive teams include sound people, and it would have been very easy to say, hey, host, set your microphone up like this and you'll sound great. It's not as though they don't have the money for the gear. It's not as though the studios didn't have audio gear lying around that could have been lent to them. So they had the equipment, they had the skill set, they had the expertise to sound great, yet they didn't. So the only real excuse would be either they have no idea what they are doing, they are lazy, or they are trying to be relatable and authentic. That is the conspiracy that was going around. The reason they sound bad is they want to sound just like us. They want us to think they are just like us. They want us to think that they think they are just like us. That's the real conspiracy because they are just like us. They just have a lot more money and a lot of them are a lot more pretentious. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about this, but who cares? So maybe there is something to that conspiracy about relatability and authenticity by sounding bad in the early 2020s or having the microphone in frame because, hey, now they're just like us, all us hobbyists who do it because it's fun, all of the people uploading videos of their friends and their family to YouTube with bad sound because they don't care about it, they're doing it to capture a moment. Now those TV hosts are just like us. They're not rich, they don't live in mansions, they don't have servants, they don't look down on us. No, they're just like us. Thank you very much, Yusuf. I really appreciate the comment and the very interesting point about relatability and authenticity. Next, we have a comment from Axe19Quiz. They say, interesting tips and information on the YouTube technicalities behind deleting YouTube videos. Though not deleted, all of your first 100 podcasts got privated, many of which contained very useful information. Some of my favorites and the ones I found containing especially useful information include BSP-15, multi-channel networks and YouTube channel growth, BSP-18, how to start a podcast, BSP-21, new Pebble watches, BSP-28, what inspired me to YouTube, as well as the Big Trouble in Little Microphone video going into several Chinese brands selling the same rebranding microphones. Regardless, thank you for the very informative podcasts that are also often entertaining. Axe, thank you very much for the very kind words about the early episodes of this podcast. If the only real concern is the information in those episodes, I think the vast majority of the relevant information has been included in follow-up videos. The main one being the how to start a podcast. That was turned into a full video on Podcastage. It was better researched, better formatted, and I think more complete. So if you need that information, I would recommend going and checking out Podcastage, how to start a podcast. I think it's 11 steps, 10 steps, something like that. As far as MCNs, I don't think there's really a thing anymore in 2024. I don't hear anybody talking about MCNs. I stopped getting emails from MCNs, which is one of the main reasons why I wanted to discuss them back in 2016-ish, because I was getting emails from MCNs, so it seemed as though it was still a problem. I don't get those anymore. I don't think people are falling for MCNs anymore. As far as YouTube channel growth, I don't know if any advice that I could have offered in 2015 or 2016 is relevant still. I did just upload a clip from 2018, 10 pieces of advice for YouTube content creators. I will link it in the episode notes. I watched it. All 10 pieces of advice still relevant, and I still stand by it. I am very proud of that. 6 years on, and the advice is still decent. That's pretty cool. So I will link that. I would recommend watching that over some 2016 video that I made saying, hey, here's how you grow a channel. Because now everything has changed. Everything changes on YouTube every 2 or 3 years. But with the advice video that I made, a lot of the advice was not, here's what you do to grow. It was more, here is advice on how to make content creation sustainable, how not to start hating what you do. As far as Pebble watches, those aren't a thing anymore. So I maybe I talked about something else in that episode. I'm going to have to go back and watch that to see what you wanted in that. We'll see. I don't think there's anything else useful in there, but I will rewatch that and reassess. And then talking about Chinese brands selling the same rebranded microphones, that also seems to be a problem that has really dwindled recently. A lot of these Chinese microphone companies do seem to be making more unique designs. They may be pulling the same off-the-shelf components, but then they're modifying them to perform better than they would just be right off the shelf. And then they're throwing them in unique form factors. And they are adding new functionality. They seem to be, I shouldn't say they, some of them seem to be taking feedback and adopting it and implementing it and improving. I think that's why we're seeing so many microphones, dynamic microphones that are XLR and USB. And a lot of them are starting to sound pretty darn good for $50 to $70. It's bonkers. 5 years ago, you would not find that. That's why the Q2U, the ATR 2100 USB were so popular, because that functionality of XLR and USB was very rare, and getting a microphone sub $100 that was XLR and USB that sounds good was also rare. Now it doesn't seem to be. So you're getting higher quality or better sounding microphones with features that are more useful to a wider audience. A lot of these Chinese companies are creating more unique designs that don't seem to be just off-the-shelf NW700 bodies. So I don't think that's really a problem anymore. But now let's discuss why I'm okay with the decision that I made to private the first 100 episodes of this podcast, even though last week I shared information from Todd B. from YouTube that deleting or privating a video is bad for your channel because it deletes the connection to the people who viewed that video. I am okay with this decision for a number of reasons. Number one, I had no idea about this when I initially made that decision and took that action. That was maybe 3 years ago. I just found out about this 2 weeks ago. So I could not have acted on this information because I didn't know it. I don't think anybody really knew it except for the people at YouTube, except for Todd B., who just shared it a couple of weeks ago. So I could not have acted on this new information because it's new information. New information has come to light, man. So that's reason one. I had no idea. You can't retroactively change your behavior based on information you get in the future. Number two, all of those videos were on a different channel. Those were videos, those were podcast episodes that were hosted on Geeks Rising. I was no longer uploading to Geeks Rising. None of the other shows were uploading to the Geeks Rising YouTube channel. So there was no activity on that channel really, so by privating those videos, I don't think it caused any direct harm. If I was still uploading to that channel, if any of the other shows were still uploading to that channel, perhaps I would look back on that action and regret it because it may have harmed the performance of new uploads, but because nobody else was really uploading or creating content there, I don't regret that action because it didn't harm anything. The only thing that stopped getting views were the videos that I privated. And the final and primary reason why I'm okay with this is This podcast is just a hobby for me. This is something that I do for fun, and I very rarely, if ever, focus on the performance. I don't care how many views an episode gets. I don't care how many downloads an episode gets. What I do care about is I am happy with the final output, and what I care about is that people get value out of it. If my action by privating these episodes did harm the performance of this channel on YouTube, so be it. I am fine with that. If it harms the downloads on the audio podcast, so be it. I am fine with that because at the end of the day, I need to be comfortable with the content that I'm publishing and the content that I have published. If I am uncomfortable with how much I swore in the early episodes, if I'm uncomfortable with how much personal information I shared in the early episodes, I don't care if it's going to impact the performance. I am going to private those videos because this is supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to cause me worry. It's not supposed to cause me concern. And in the early episodes, if I swore too much or shared too much and that makes me uncomfortable, I don't care how the action will impact the performance of this show. I'm going to private those videos because I need to be comfortable with what I am doing. Let me convey that message. You should not feel an obligation to keep everything you have published live, even though we got this information from YouTube. If something you have published in the past does not reflect you, feel free to private it or delete it. If something you have done in the past makes you uncomfortable, feel free to private it or delete it. Do not let the tweet that I shared from Todd force you into a position where you leave something up that makes you uncomfortable, where you leave something up that doesn't reflect you, where you leave something up that has bad information just to save that connection with the viewer. Who cares? You need to be comfortable with what you publish, what you have published. So that is what you should focus on. Yes, if you can stop yourself from privating or deleting a video, do it. That will save the connection to your viewer. But if that video existing does make you uncomfortable, it has bad information, or it doesn't reflect you, private it. Delete it. Who cares? I deleted 100 episodes of this show. I sleep like a baby at night. I don't care. Although I am going to go back and re-listen to those episodes to see what I said, what helpful information could be in an episode about Pebble watches, because Pebble watches don't exist anymore. But thank you very much for your question or your insight here. I really appreciate it. I also enjoyed getting on my soapbox for a little bit and sharing my perspective a bit more on this topic because on the last episode, maybe it came across as nobody should ever delete anything on YouTube ever, which is not the case. You need to be able to sleep at night. Do whatever makes you comfortable. Who cares what Todd says? Just understand how it's going to impact your channel. And when I did it, I had no idea this was a thing. That is my get out of jail free card. Thank you very much, Axe19 Quiz. I appreciate the comment very much. Now let's jump to the value for value section because this is a V for V podcast. What that means is I do not put this show behind a paywall. I do not have ads in this show. I just try to add as much value as I can. And if you get any value out of this show, I ask you send that back in whatever format that you can, whether it be time, talent, or treasure. We're focusing on the treasure right now, and the first treasure comes from Larry Marceau 4492, 2 USD. He says, "Thanks for the do not delete tip." Larry, thank you very much for the 2 USD. I'm really glad that tip was helpful and informative. That blew my mind when I came across it, so I'm happy that I was able to share that and that you were able to learn something from that. And again, thank you for the 2 USD. Next, we have $6.99 Canadian from Greg LG, and he says, "Happy Easter." Greg, thank you very much for the 7 Canadian dollars and a very happy Easter to you. A very happy belated Easter to you. He is risen. Thank you very much for the constant support. I really do appreciate you. And the final treasure we got is from TechMed Raina Richter. He says, "Danke" with €25. Raina, thank you so much for the €25 for the constant support. I truly do appreciate it, and it really does mean the world to me. If you enjoy this show and you enjoy it ad-free, it is thanks to the wonderful support of these people in this episode. If you want to keep this show going ad-free for the future, feel free to contribute in whatever way you can, whether it be time, talent, or treasure. Do you want to make a thumbnail? Do you want to tell me what to clip for a clip? Do you want to send in some treasure? Do whatever you can, and I deeply appreciate the support of Larry, Greg, and Raina this week. Thank you to them. And that is going to wrap up this week's episode. Next week, we will have some Ask Bandrews. I just needed more time with them to digest them and come up with proper answers. Let me know what you thought. Overhead booming a Shure SM7B. This is stupid, but let me know what you thought of the audio. Hopefully I can get it to sound decent, and hopefully I didn't have the worst positioning ever, but I may have. I don't know what that accent was. Thank you so much for coming by. Thank you deeply for spending your time with me. I really do appreciate it. I hope you have an amazing Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Next Sunday, I will be back. I will be talking at you, with you, about whatever you want. I will talk to you then. I love you. Bye-bye. Whoa, whoa, boop.
This has been a Geeks Rising production. Your executive producer is Bandrew Scott. For more information, head over to www.geeksrising.com.